Thank you so much. Okay. So let's get started. So we say v'hod it not. That we learn in the Mishnah. Amr l'meisa ishtacha. They say to a guy, your wife, we'll call her Mrs. A, has died. V'nasa chusa me'aviyah, and he marries Mrs. A's half sister from her father, Mrs. B. Mesa, she dies. V'nasa achosa me'ima, and he marries Mrs. B's half sister from her mother, Mrs. C. Mesa v'nasa achosa me'aviyah. Then Mrs. C dies, and he marries Mrs. C's half sister from her father, Mrs. D. Mesa, then she dies, v'nasa achosa me'ima, and he marries Mrs. D's half sister from her mother. So you have every other one is related. One is related to two, half sister. Two is three is two's half sister. Four is three's half sister. Five is four's half sister. However, Mrs. A and Mrs. C are not related. Mrs. C and Mrs. E are not related. So he keeps marrying everybody else's half sister. So who is he married to and who isn't he? So we say mutter b'rishona b'shlishis b'chamishis. The first woman he was married to, Mrs. A. Well, that was totally mutter. But the second one was his first wife's half sister. Well, you can't marry a half sister of your wife. You can't marry your wife's sister, even if it's a half sister, even after death. Apparently here, so we say, so b'rishona mutter b'rishona b'shlishis b'chamishis. He's mutter in the first, third, and fifth. They are his wives. Those marriages were real, legitimate marriages. And upotros toroseyan, and if they were to fall to yibum and you were to do yibum with them, they would pater a tsar. They would pater another wife, where he'd have two wives and one of them were to fall to yibum, and he did yibum to one of them, it would pater the other wife. Asur b'shniya b'revius. And he is asur to the second and the fourth. That's not a good marriage because it was his wife's half sister, right? One, Mrs. A was a legitimate marriage. Mrs. B is related to Mrs. A. It's not a legitimate marriage. Mrs. C was not related to Mrs. A. Thus, Mrs. C is a legitimate marriage. Again, Mrs. D is related to Mrs. C. So then that's not a legitimate marriage. But Mrs. E is not related to Mrs. C, and that is a legitimate marriage. So A, C, and E are not related. Therefore, those marriages were legitimate. But Mrs. B and Mrs. D were related, and the marriage is not legitimate. Fine. Therefore, were he to die at any point at the point of one of these marriages, and they fell to yibum, the second or fourth marriage, and he had more than one wife and both fell to yibum, and he did bia to Mrs. B or Mrs. D, well, they aren't his wife, and that wouldn't pater the tsar. They wouldn't pater his other wife from yibum. V'im bo ala shnei la'achar misas harishayna mutter b'shnei b'revius upoter storoseyan. Now note, this again, a wife's sister is only usher during her lifetime. So the case is here where the question is, when did he marry these women? When did he marry these women? It sounds from the Pashup Pshat of the Mishnah that it was one after the next, after the next. After the first marriage, then she died, then he married her half sister, then she died. But apparently the Mishnah's understanding it, our first understanding of the Mishnah is that we're talking with he actually married them during the lifetime. If he were to marry the second wife, Mrs. B, who's his original wife's half sister, after the original wife died, then he married her. Then he's mutter b'shniya b'revius upotros toroseyan v'asur b'shlishis b'chamishis. Then the first wife is passed away. He is mutter to marry her half sister. He does. At that point, he would not be able to marry Mrs. B's half sister, Mrs. C. So Mrs. C would not be a good marriage. However, Mrs. D is unrelated, and he wouldn't be able to marry her. Then he can't marry Mrs. E, who is Mrs. D's half sister. So then 3 and 5 would not be a good marriage. That's the way it works out. So our original reading of the Brisa, you have to understand when it says Mesa in the Brisa, according to this, doesn't mean that he actually married them after these women died, which is interesting. Interesting way of reading the Brisa is the first way that we're understanding it. That he actually married the second while the first was alive, prior to her death. Then the second is not a good marriage, but the third and fifth will be. If, however, he married the second after the first one's death, then the first, third, and fifth, then the second and fourth, first, second, and fourth will be legitimate marriages. Okay, that was really yesterday's daf. We just have to get through. Let's go. So we say Alma. So what comes out? We were talking about marrying a half sister of one's wife, and we said, well, this is her half sister from her father, this is her half sister from her mother. So we see a wife's sister is usher whether it's a half sister from the father or the mother. Manalan, how do we know that a wife's half sister is usher whether it be from the father or the mother? Yolef me'achoso, we learn out from the isser of marrying one's sister. Ma'achoso b'menav b'menaim, afkan b'menav b'menaim, just like the isser marrying one's sister applies whether she is one sister from his father or his mother. So through here, it will apply that achos ishto, the wife's sister, doesn't matter. She's usher to you whether she's the sister from the father or the mother, whether she's her sister from her father or her mother. So we say, learn out from the daso, learn out from his aunt, i.e. his father's brother's wife. You're only usher in your father's brother's wife when he's your father's brother from his father. If they don't share the same father, he's just a half brother from your father's mother, then his wife is not usher to you in Arias. Okay. So therefore we see that, at least in that relationship, it's only if they were brothers from the father that it's usher. So through here I'll say, achos ishto, a wife's sister, will only be usher if they are sisters from the father. So we say, why not learn out from the dasa? What do we learn out from achoso, his sister, or do we learn out from his aunt? We say we should learn out from achos ishto, from his wife's sister, because in that case, it's his direct relative. It's on his generation. It's a relationship of his level generation, not of his father's level. Not as opposed to the dasa, which is not his relatives, but rather a relative of his father. That relationship is related through his father, his father's brother. So we'll learn from achoso to say just like achoso is usher whether it's a half sister from the father or the mother, so too his wife's sister is usher whether it's a half sister to his wife from the father or the mother. Okay. We say adarabah, no, we should learn out from the aunt, because the aunt is an isra arise that's established through marriage, and his wife's sister is an isra arise that's established through marriage, i.e. through his marriage to his wife. Whereas his sister is a natural occurrence. That isra applies without the occurrence of marriage. That relationship occurs without the occurrence of marriage. Therefore, achos ishto is more similar to dodasa, and I'll learn out that only a wife's sister from her father is usher to you. Okay. What's the parallel? They're both al yedei kedushin. Ella me'eshes ach yalfinan. Rather, we learn from eshes ach. So we say between the das and achoso. So you could say it this way, say it that way. Which one to learn out of? Rather, we learn out from eshes ach. We learn out from one's brother's wife. Yalfinan, there we'll learn that out. The shekain davar yedei kedushin b'kroviyatz, because there it's his generation relative, it's his brother's wife, right? Not his father's brother's wife. It's his brother's wife. The eshes ach, and it's a davar yedei kedushin, and it's an issue that's established through kedushin, right? The shekain davar yedei kedushin b'kroviyatzmo. Fine. And when you usher to your brother's wife, it doesn't matter if he's a half brother from your father or a half brother from your mother. You're usher to his wife anyway, and that's a your generation issue. You're dealing with someone in your generation, and it is ayidei kedushin. So we're learning out from Meshes Ach. How do we know achos ishto, a wife's sister, is usher to you whether it's your wife's sister from her father or mother? From Meshes Ach, which is usher to you whether it's your brother. Your brother's wife is usher to you whether it's your brother from your father or your brother from your mother. Now we're going to say, how do we know Ishasach is usher whether he's a half brother from a father or a mother? Ishasach gufa manalan Titania. How do we know Ishasach? Titania living in the brisa. Ever say Ishasachelu sigala. The pasuk in Achreim says, ever say Ishasachelu sigala, that don't reveal the erva of your brother. I.e., do not have relations with his wife. Beimina av beimina aim, whether he's from your father or your mother, whether he's a brother from your father or your mother. Ata oimer beimina av beimina aim, oeno elamina av elaminaim. Is it both from your father or your mother? Is it only from your father? Maybe it's only referring to a brother from your father. V'dinhu chayiv kan v'chayiv be'achoso. We say it makes sense because you're chayiv here and you're chayiv by achoso, and ma'achoso by your sister, and ma'achoso b'manav b'nemanim, afkan b'nemav b'nemanim. And just like by achoso applies whether she's your sister from your father or your mother, so to here your brother's wife should be also to you whether he's your brother from your father or your mother. We say, right. Oh, kilech l'derech zu, or maybe you could say it the other way. Says the Gemara, chayiv kam chayiv b'dadasu. You're chayiv and you're chayiv by your aunt, by your father's brother's wife. Ma dadasu minav eliminaim, af kam minav eliminaim. And there it's only if he's your father's brother's wife. If it's your wife's, it's only if it's your father's brother from the same father. that his wife is asur to you be'arayas, but if he's your father's brother from the same mother, he's not. And we'll learn out from Ta'eshes Ach, to your brother's wife, as being asur only if the relationship is parental, if you share a common parental relationship. Fine. So we say, maybe we would learn from the Daso to say it's only a brother from the same father, not from the same mother. So answers the Gemara Nira Lami Doima. Again, we have these two forces, Achoso, Dodaso. Which one do we learn out of? Same thing as we had by Achosishto. Says the Gemara Nira Lami Doima. Let's compare. Dani Kraviatzmo Mikraviatzmo Beatohiach Dodaso Shikravia. We should learn out from somebody on your generation level, which would be Eshes Ach, your brother. We learn out from your sister, right? Your brother's wife should be learned from your sister, not your father's brother's wife. That's a different generation. So we say, that's one idea to learn out from Achoso. Oh, kalach l'derech zu. Dan in davashay kedushin, but davashay kedushin. Maybe we should learn out from Dodaso, from your aunt, because there it's an isser established through kedushin to your brother's wife, which is an isser established through kedushin from the kedushin that your brother did to that woman, right? As opposed to your sister, again, is a natural relationship. It's not established through kedushin. That's an isser that happens by itself. It's a natural isser. It's not established through kedushin. The relationship of you to your sister. So again, we're back. Achoso, Dodaso. If we learn from Dodaso, it's only going to be a common sibling from the father. If you learn from Achoso, it'll be a sibling, whether it's from the same father or the same mother. And now we're trying to establish again what is the isser of one's brother's wife for the purposes of then learning out to saying that this is the makor to learn out to Achos Ishto, to one's wife's sister. Talmud learned by the pasuk says, the pasuk finishes off in Achremis, it is your brother's erva. That's how the pasuk finishes off. So you want to say, what's it repeating? It's coming to repeat whether he's a brother from your father or from a mother. I'll tell you, no, that extra pasuk you can't say is coming to add a brother from the same mother as well as the same father, right? Maybe both psukim are required for a brother from the same father. And we learn out from Dodaso, right? Chada, this is all the Gemara just really asking us. Chada, the yesh laban b'chai ba'alo. One, the first pasuk will be telling me where your brother's wife after a divorce has children, and that is an Isser Arayis. And then the Erva Sachicha it is your brother's Erva. That finishing off of that pasuk is coming to add V'choda de'ein laban b'chai ba'alo. It'll be where he divorces her, and she doesn't have children. There is no children from that marriage, but the brother's still alive. B'chai ba'alo, right? He divorced her. So, and still, you will be usher to this woman be'arayas. So we say, the isser of a woman who doesn't have children, the isser of your brother's wife after a divorce, while your brother's still alive, in the case where they didn't have children, we already know out from the teaching of Rav Huna, which was taught on the Dalam base, from the fact that it said Nida by Eshes Ach, that we said, we should Eshes Ach and Nida, rather we say it's like a Nida, that Ma Nida Afa Pishesh Laheter Lachim Mikan, B'Shas Yisura B'Karis, Av Eshes Ach Nami Afa Pishesh Laheter Lachim Mikan, B'Chai Baila B'Karis. That in the case of Chai Baila, in the case where her husband's alive, whether there's children or not, she's Asur B'Karis. I ain't showing the Gemara and the Dalam base, but that's what we'll learn that out also. So we already know the Isser Karis too, a case where there was no children while the brother's still alive after a divorce. And therefore, I don't need the second pasuk to be telling me that case of Ein La Bana B'Chai Ba'ila for Eshes Ach Mina Av. Elamai must be coming to add Eshes Ach Mina Aim, right? The wife of your father, or the wife of your brother when he's a brother from your mother, half brother from your mother. Okay. Let's continue. So we say the Ema Aida Aida Eshes Ach Mina Av. No, go back. Maybe both psukim are dealing with Eshes Ach Mina Av. Both psukim are dealing with a brother where it's a common brother from the same father. Choda Deyesh Labanim B'Chai Ba'ila, Choda Deyesh Labanim La'achar Misas Ba'ila. One pasuk is coming to tell me where there is children while the husband's alive, that she is, whether divorced or whatever, that she will be asked to be arise. And one is a case where there are children after the death, right, of the brother, that she still is your brother's wife remains usher to you. In a case where there are children even after his death, right, even only applies if there were no children. Otherwise, she stays usher as Eshes Ach. So we say that. We say Yesh Labanim Lachem Misas Baila L'Tzricha. You don't need to tell me a case where there are children after the death of your brother that his wife remains usher to you. L'Tzricha Kroi. You don't need a pasuk Midiyam Rachmana Shein Labanim Materas, because since the Torah only specified the heter of Yibum in a case where there are no children, so Hayesh Labanim Asur, that would imply that where there are children, even after your brother's death, his wife remains usher to you as Eshes Ach. V'dilma, ein labanim asur la'alma v'shari liyobim, yesh labanim shari la'alma v'shari liyobim. The Gemara says that's not really a proof to show me already the isser of where there are no children after the brother's death. right? I'm sorry, where there are children after the brother's death. Where there are children after the brother's death, I don't necessarily know that from Yibum. That's not implied from the Het of Yibum. Just because you'll tell me that Het of Yibum applies where there are no children, so then it must be that she's usher where there are children. Not necessarily. Maybe I'll tell you that where there are no children, she is usher to everybody else and mutter only to the brother, only to the Yibum. But where she has children after the death of the husband, then she's totally mutter, and anybody, including the Yibum, can marry her. Right? Maybe this whole, you can't say, oh, it's only in this case of Yibum we see she's mutter, otherwise she must be usher. We'll say, no, maybe in this case of Yibum she's only mutter to the Yibum, otherwise she would be totally mutter to everybody else. There would be no partial of Yibum, but she would be mutter to everybody. And therefore, I need a pasuk, to apply the Isser of where it's Yesh Lahem Banim, where they have children after the brother's death. To say that she is still Eshes Ach. And thus, both parts of the pasuk could be required, even if we're only discussing an Eshes Ach Mina Av, a brother from the same father. Inami, or I'll tell you, Ein Labanim Mitzvah, Yesh Labanim Rishus, or I'll tell you another reason why I need this pasuk for Eshes Ach Mina Av. Because I'll tell you that where there are no children, there's a mitzvah to marry her. But were it to be Yesh Labanim, were it to have children after the brother's death, it would only be a Rishus to marry her. You'd be able to, but it wouldn't be a mitzvah. Maybe that's the idea. So again, you don't see from Yibum that otherwise would be usher, you just see it wouldn't be a mitzvah to marry her. Were she to have children after the brother's death. Inami ein labanim ein yesh labanim lo. Or maybe you're right. The diak is, like we wanted to say before, that from Yibum alone, the heter of Yibum I would see, otherwise she would be usher, right? If she had children, the heter of Yibum only applies where there are no children. Were there to be children, she would taka be usher. But what would that be implying? It would be implying a los aseh from an aseh. From the mitzvah of Yibum, I see otherwise she'd be usher. We have a rule that v'lava ba meklau aseh aseh. A negative transgression that's implied from a positive commandment has the halacha of a positive commandment. It's called an Isser Aseh. When the Torah says, do this, and I hear, oh, well, then I shouldn't do that. Well, the Torah didn't tell me don't do that, so then the actual halachic status of the don't do that is an Aseh. It's a positive commandment. Has the status of a positive commandment. So to here would only be an Aseh. There wouldn't be Malchus, there wouldn't be anything big on it, there wouldn't be a Karis on it. Right, it would just be an aseh. That's just the Torah said, do Yibum where there are children, and I hear out, do Yibum where there are no children, I would hear out, well, when there are children, there is no Yibum. So that would only be an aseh, because it's only implied from the aseh, and a love of ba meklau aseh, aseh. There wouldn't be a kares on that. Plus of kra acharina, therefore I have another pasuk, so fine, so therefore I need this pasuk, to tell me that there's the Isser of Eshes Ach as it exists during the lifetime of the brother, exists as well after the lifetime of the brother in the case where there are children. Fine, so I don't have that extra pasuk to tell me Eshes Ach Mina Aim of a brother's wife when the brother's from the same, it's your brother from your mother. Interesting. Gemara Kasav Krachrina Ervis Achiv Gila. We say there's a third pasuk that adds Ervis Achiv Gila. On the Isser of having relations with one's brother's wife, it says you have revealed the erva of your brother. It's a pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim. And anything you want to tell me that I need to learn out also for Eshes Ach Mina Av, for where there are children after the death of the brother, to tell you that is still an Isser Kares, not an Isser Aseh, or maybe I would think it's Mutter, whatever we already discussed. That I would know from that pasuk in Kedoshim, that pasuk of Ervis Achiv Gila, that extra pasuk. But, and therefore I have the pasuk of Ervis Achecha Hi in Achremis. That extra pasuk is coming to add Echav Mina Aim, coming to add to Aser to you, the wife of your brother, when he's a half brother from your mother. Okay, so ultimately I'm learning it out from the pasuk of Ervis Achecha Hi. The Ema Eshes Ach Mina Aim Ke Eshes Ach Mina Av. So now that we've established, the Gemara is really going to go on a tangent here. Basically, what we did was we established that Eshes Ach Mina, Eshes Achiv, the issue of one's brother's wife applies whether he's a brother, half brother from the father or the mother, and thus from there we see Eshes Ach would be Aser Beimina Av Beimina Aim, whether he's a brother from the father or the mother, and that's the best limit to Achos Ishto, to his wife's sister, because it's Krovei Atzmo, it's on his generation level. And it's Al Yidei Kedushin. It's an issue that's established through marriage. It's a relationship that's established through marriage. And therefore, just like that applies bein to the mother, bein to the father, whichever one is the half-sibling, so to Achos Ishto. So to one's wife's sister will be Aser, whether that relationship of one's wife's sister, i.e. the sister to the wife, is Mina Av or Mina Aim. It's from the father or the mother. Okay, that's basically what we came out with. Now the Gemara is going to go on a tangent of now that we've compared that, now that we've stated that Eshes Ach, the issue of one's brother's wife applies both whether he's a half brother from the father or the mother. We're going to continue. We're going to ask a very interesting question. Ve'ema Eshes Ach mina aim ke Eshes Ach mina av. Say that Eshes Ach mina aim, your half brother from your mother's, your half brother from your mother, his wife should be the status of your half brother from your father's wife, right? Ma Eshes Ach mina av la'achar misas ba'ala sharia. Just like you have a parsha of Yibum, by your brother's wife when he's a brother from your father. So too, Eshes Ach mina aim la'achar misas ba'ala sharia. We see the Isser Eshes Ach applies as well to a half brother from your mother. So his wife after his death should be permissible in Yibum. Why is the parsha of Yibum specific to Eshes Ach mina av, to a brother from the same father? Amar Kra, the pasuk says he. Ervasahecha he. Right, that was the pasuk that we came to add to show that the Isra of Eshes Ach applies as well to a half brother from your mother. And the pasuk finishes off he. Ervasahecha he. She is an Ervasahecha. That is, she is Erva to you from your brother. Behavyasat teheh. He we darshan as a lashon of behavyasat teheh. That's what she is, and that's what she'll be. She'll stay in that status. Like we'll say v'haya behavyasat tia. This idea. So that's the drasha here. He behavyasat, she stays in the status of erva always, right? That's what the pasuk is coming to tell me. So in the pasuk that includes Eshes Ach mina aim, tells me there that status of Eshes Ach remains always. She will always be Eshes Ach mina aim because he behavyasat, she remains as she is. There's no heter to this isser. Okay. Now we're darshaning all these pesukim of achoso, the daso. What do we need? Eshes Ahecha. What's it coming for? Ervasach Gila. So we're going to go into these two pesukim of achoso and the daso, which we've been using as factors to learn out half sibling from the mother or only from the father. Right? We're going to go into those pesukim a little bit and just say a few drashas on them. We say achoso because of balkares lamali. We already know that all arayas are hukshla dadi, and it says v'nichrasu nafashas ha'osis, that anyone who does any of these arayas gets kares, and they're all compared together. So the question is that why does it say kares by achoso, by his sister? Why does it have to tell me kares? I already know kares because all arayas are included in this pasuk that says v'nichrasu, they'll get kares. Why does it say kares specifically by the arayas of one sister? Lichter Rabbi Yochanan, we say like Rabbi Yochanan, Damar Rabbi Yochanan, Shim Asim Kulam Behelam Achas, Chayv Aklachas Va'achas. It's coming to tell me that if you did all of these arayas in one helam, you for some reason forgot, you didn't read Parshas Achremis, you slept through it one year, slept through it the next year, and you forgot that it's Aser, or you forgot who these people were, you forgot that this person was related to you, whatever, and the person in one helam, in one space out, was over many of these arayas. So, would he bring it? Was it one shogeg to bring one carbon chatas, or was it considered to be many different averas done in one helm to bring separate carbonates? So we see the fact that it says kares by achoso, we treat it like there's a kares written by each avera, and for every kares that you do b'shogeg, you bring a carbon. So you would bring a carbon for each of the arayas that a person was over, even if it was over in one shkaga. That's what's coming to add. Rabbi Yitzchak says the reason it says kares ba'achoso is to tell me that you only get kares. There is no malchus. If they give her a straw, normally you'll say you get malchus. But if they give a straw, he holds on a choso, it's a straw for kares. It's not a straw for malchus, and she won't get malchus. You don't get malchus in a kares according to Rabbi Yitzchak, because the Yisr is kares already. So then he uses kares for a choso to tell me kares and not malchus. L'chalek manalan, or to tell me really in general, you never get malchus for an Isser kares. L'chalek manalan. So how does he know this? Where does he know this rule? That if somebody were to be over all of the arayas in one shkaga, he would be chayiv a separate carbon for each arayas that he transgressed. Nafkalei miva'al isha b'nidas tumasa. He learns it from the pasuk of Elisha b'nidas tumasa lo sikrav, that one should not approach a woman in her status of nida tuma. And that's where he knows it. L'chayva kol isha ve'isha. Because why does it say isha? It should just say v'lenida lo sikrav. Don't go close to a nida. Why ve'isha? To tell you that l'chayva kol isha ve'isha. For every nida that he approaches, he was over another avera. Vel isha b'nidas tumasa lo sikrav. That's not just every arayas, but we treat each woman of the arayas as an individual isser. And therefore, you'd be machayiv you would bring a carbon chatas for each woman that he had relations with in even in one shkaga, even in one helam, even in one space out of forgetting that there's an Israel, forgetting who these people were. Okay. That from that pasuk you would know the limit that Rabbi Yochanan learns out from the Karis of Achoso. All right, the das of the Kaspa Rachmana Aririm Yu Lamali. What does the pasuk say? Aririm Yu by the dasa by his aunt. By the Yisra of his aunt, the pasuk says that Aririm Yu they will be childless. Right? They do this avera when it's had relations with his father's brother's wife. They will be childless. What does it say? Aririm Yu Lamali lich the Rabba like Rabba. The Rabba Rami Ksiv Rabba brought a contradiction. Ksivarim Yu Ksivarim Yamusu. One pasuk says Arim Yu they will be Aririm, they will be childless, and the other pasuk says again by the daso by his father's brother's wife. It says Arim Yamusu they will die childless. Okay, it said, how is this? Yesh labanim kovrin. If they have children, kovrin, they will bury their children. Meaning, if at the time they were over the avera of the araya, saveshas achiv, they will bury those children if they are alive. Ein labanim holech hariri. And if he doesn't have children yet, he will not have children. It's the richlamichtav arim yu. It's the richlamichtav arim yamusu. We need both arim yu and arim yamusu. We need both of these psukim. Because rachman arim yu. If it just said arim yu, they will be childless. Mashma that at this point they have children, right? But they will be childless at the end of the day, i.e. kovrin, they will bury them. Havamina ad chote avamachadevei right? I would think that means that when you transgress the avera of whatever, the dodaso, his aunt, having relations with one's aunt, that would mean Arim Yu that if he has children at the time of that transgression, those children will die. But if he happens to have children after that transgression, maybe they won't die. Maybe they'll live. It's just that the children that he has up until then will die. Arim Yu, he will be Aririm from that which he has now. He will be childless from that which he has now. Because Rechmana Arim Musu, no, he will die childless. Meaning, even from here on out, even from the Avera and out, he will not have children. Because of Rechmana Arim Musu, if the pasuk had said Arim Musu that they will die childless, I would think that means that he will die childless. Right? He won't have more children from the time of the Avera onward. But Ami Carlo. But maybe if he already had children at the time of the Avera, they wouldn't die. He would already have had those children. Just from here out, he will die childless. He won't have any more children. So I need both. To say that if he has children up to now, they will die, and he will not have any children from the time of the Avera and until his death. Again, there's always tshuva. So, okay. There's an interesting discussion of Hariri. The Isser of Hariri applies to all krisis. Is that like part of kares? Rashi holds every kares comes with an Hariri. Every kares has this childless rule. Tosus and Shabbos argues. It's a big discussion. What is the Hariri and how does it work? It's really there in Shabbos. Okay, let's continue. So we say, Ha'ara dechayvin lava manalan. How do we know that Ha'ara, we're going to get back into this. We had this yesterday. Ha'ara dechayvin lava manalan. How do we know that the Isser losase, a woman who's usher to you only and a losase, it's not a kares. How do we know that Ha'ara is enough to say that you've transgressed that losase? Okay, fine. So we say, Manalan. So we say, since the pasuk says, Shich Vasera Gabi Shich Charufa, Meklal the Chav 11 Beha'ara, since the pasuk says, Shich Vasera, that you need to have a full relations, a complete relations, by a Shivcha Charufa, which is a partial Shivcha Kananis, she's a partial Shivcha, she is only Asur Balosase, there would not be she's not considered to be a real Ashes Ish, right? She's partly married to an Evet Ivri. Then in that case you need a Shivcha Zera, you need a full relations. But Meklad Chavilavin Beha'ara. But otherwise, besides that case, other Chavilavin are Beha'ara. And the reason is because by Shivcha Charufa there's a carbon asham that you bring as well. You get it's Malkus and a carbon asham. By other Chavilavin, there's no carbon asham. That's a chiddush in the Torah by Shivcha Charufa because she's like a semi-Ashes Ish. So, like, what is the case there? So we say that there's Malkus and there's a carbon asham. So because you're bringing a carbon asham, that standard of carbon asham requires Shich Vasera, requires a full relations. But a normal losase that would imply does not need Shich Vasera. Ha'ara would be sufficient. It doesn't need a full relations, it just needs the beginning of a relations. That would be sufficient. Fine. To say that you have transgressed the Yisolo Sase. Okay. Fine. So from the fact that Shivcha Zera by Shivcha Rufa to see that whether you need a carbon asham, then you need a Shivcha Zera, Meklad Chav 11 that do not require a carbon asham, would not require like a mamzer, right? That would not require Shivcha Zera, that would be sufficient with less. That would be sufficient with ha'ara. So we say Adra, but no. Since the Torah says ha'ara by chave krisis, as we said before in Nandal and Aleph, we see that it says ha'ara by chave krisis, that you're over in a Sakaris with ha'ara. That would apply by a chi of love that you need a gemar bia. That would imply that by a chi of love the standard is lower. You wouldn't need to do ha'ara. Gemar bia would be sufficient. Amar Vashim can lish the kram shiv charufa. If so, then why do you need the pasuk by shiv charufa? If I already know gemar bia because it says ha'ara by krisis, implying that anything less than a kares does not, ha'ara would not be so chamor, right? Isser kares is more chamor. So by isser kares there it's more chamor. So we're machayev, you already own ha'ara. That would imply that where it's less chamor, we're not gonna be so strict with you, and you're only gonna be over the losa say with a gemar bia with the full relations, right? Full active relations. That if that's true. And that's how we know Chave Lovin that you need Gemar Bia, not Ha'ara. Then why does the Torah have to tell me by Shiv Charufa says Rav Ashi that you need Gemar Bia? All Chave Lovin I would assume need Gemar Bia because it said Ha'ara by Krisis. Elamai, that's not true. From the fact that it said, and maybe I would have thought that, but once the Torah tells me Gemar Bia by Shiv Charufa, that shows me that Dafka Shiv Charufa, there only do you require a Gemar Bia, but because you have a carbon Asham, other Chave Lovin where there is not a carbon Asham, Shiv Charufa is a very interesting case. Other Chayv 11 that do not require a carbon asham like a mamzer, that ha'ara will be sufficient to be over. Fine. Ha'ara de Chayv 11 de kahuna manalan. What about Chayv 11 de kahuna? Right? Like a grusha to a kohen. Right there, we're not going to learn this out from Shivcha Ruf because Shivcha Ruf is an issue that applies to anybody. Nobody can be with this Shivcha who's married to an Eved Ivri. Nobody can be with her. There's a special case there. Nobody can be with her. But by Isuri Kahuna, most people can marry a Grusha. Only a Kohen can't. So we're not going to learn out from there to Isurim that don't apply to everybody. So how do we know? Ha'ara by Chavilam de Kahuna Manalan Asya Kicha Kicha. There we learn out from Gzeira Shava that it says Lo Yikachu. These women Lo Yikachu by a Kahuna, by a Kohen, they shouldn't be taken. They shouldn't be married to them. And it says Kicha by Isuri Kares. As it says Ishki Isha Shayika Chesachoso by a Choso. It says Isha Shayika Chesachoso when a man takes his sister. So we say Kicha Kicha. That's Gzeira Shava from Isuri Kares. Isuri Kares Beha'ara. So too, Chavi Lavin Tekuna Beha'ara. The Chavi Aseh Manalan. What about Chavi Aseh? How do we know Chavi Aseh? Women that are only us a few as Naseh, which would be in a case, it's very few cases like that. One case would be, it says, B'dor Shlishi Yavo, that by Mitzri. That Mitzri can only come in by the third generation, they can start to marry into the Jewish people. And that's expressed as in the third generation they can come in, which implies less than third generation not. We already said before, Love Aseh, when you imply a negative from a positive statement, that is the status of a Aseh. So what about an Isra Aseh? How do we know that you're over those Averas with Ha'ara alone? Asya Biyabiyah. We learn out Biyabiyah because it says Lo Yavo by the Mitzri that he can't come into the Klal Yisrael until the third generation. It says Biyah by Chave Lovin, as it says Lo Yavo Mamzer B'Kal Hashem, that the Mamzer can't come into the generation, so it can't come into Klal Yisrael. So we learn out Biyabiyah from Chave Lovin. So Chave Aseh we learn out from Chave Lovin to say that it's also Beha'ara, as we already established from Shiv Charufa, and Chave Lovin de Kahuna we learn out Kicha from Yisrei Kares. Yevamos l'shuk, Manalan. What about Yevamos l'shuk? The Isra of Yevama to be with somebody other than the Yavam while she's still in Yibum limbo, right? Where do we know that Avera, that Isra applies even with Ha'ara? You've already transgressed that Isra. Manalan, it's a discussion. We'll see later on at Tzadi Gimel, at Tzadi Beis, and Beis actually, that with this discussion whether Yevama l'shuk or Yevama to marry to be with anybody else other than the Yavam is an Isra, a lo saseh or an Isra aseh. Otherwise it's a lo saseh or an aseh. We already established that a lo saseh or an aseh is chayiv on ha'ara alone. So that Avera of Yevama l'shuk will be transgressed with ha'ara alone. Eli Yevama l'Yavam manalan. How do we know that the Yavam is kind of the Yevama acquires the Yevama with an act of ha'ara alone? Asya Bia Bia. We learn out Gzeira Shava of Bia Bia. As it says, Yevama Yavo Aleha. And we already established that it says Bia by Chave Lovin. So therefore we'll learn out, just like there's Beha'ara, so here's Beha'ara. So we say, Isha L'bayla Manalan. How do we know that an Isha to her husband is acquired through Ha'ara alone? Asya Kicha Kicha. We learn out Kicha Kicha. Again, it says, it says Kicha by Arias, by Ochoso, and it says Kicha by Isha Sheyikach, Yikach Ish Isha. When a person is with a woman, Ubala, and he's boiler. So it says here, Kicha Kicha, that the acquisition of Bias Kedushin, which is having relations with a woman, is one way to acquire her in a Kedushin status. We'll see that in Maseches Kedushin relatively soon. And We'll learn out from there that a woman is required when one performs the act of kedushin through bia, through relations, that will be established, will be achieved through ha'ara alone. Amarav, says Rav, Lamali because of Rechmana Shich Vasera B'Shich Harufa, Shich Vasera B'Shich Vasera B'Soito. I already know that Shich Vasera, we already said, applies. Well, we'll see what he means. Amarav, Lamali because of Rechmana Shich Vasera B'Shich Harufa, Shich Vasera B'Ishasish, Shich Vasera B'Soito. Why does it say Shich Vasera by these three women? Shich Harufa, Ishasish, and Soita. The Shich Harufa Kediyamar. By Shich Harufa, we already established it says Shich Vasera B'Shich Harufa. To tell you Davka by Shich Harufa, where there's a key of carbon asham, there you need a full relations to transgress the Yisr. But a normal losa say you wouldn't. So it's coming to tell me that by a losa say you're over the losa say with losa relating to being with a woman. It says that you be over with it over that losa say with ha'ara alone. That's when we need the shiv chasera said by shiv charufa, as we already established earlier. Fine, the ishasish. What about the shiv chasera that said by ishasish? Prat l'mashamish meis. That's going to exclude one who has relations without when he is not aroused. He has relations with the woman while not aroused. Hanich lamanda amar mishamish meis be'arayis. So Potter, that makes sense by the opinion that holds that would not be a transgression of arayis. When a person has relations with one of the arayis in a state where he is not aroused, he is Potter. That's not considered to transgress the arayis, and therefore it says shich vasera to exclude that case. El lamanda mar chayev. However, there's an opinion out there that holds that he is chayev in that situation. We want to have relations with an arayis in a state where he is not aroused. He would be chayev. He has transgressed the arayis. So then you can't tell me it's coming to exclude that case. That case is a chayiv case. So Michael Mesa. Rather, it's coming to exclude is one who has relations with a dead woman. Shich vaser, meaning it's a union that could come to fertilization. That's the idea. So it says here prat l'meshamish mesa. Rather, it's excluding somebody the case where the guy is over one of the arayas, but the woman's dead. So it's a corpse. So it says the hoyol la'achar misa nami yikri she'ero. And it says, so therefore it says to tell you that even though it says she'ero, it says by the chiyuv of the husband to be matami to his wife, it says if she's dead, it says that she is she'ero, she is related to him, she is his relative. He will be matami to her to bury her. And therefore we see she's still ish even after death. I would think maybe since that reference we still consider her related to the husband after death, she would be an ish. That a person worried to be boiler while she's dead would be over the Isra ish. Kamash Mulan no shichvas zera. You're only over ish with a union that could come to fertilization, i.e. the woman's alive. Okay. The soitas. That's why it says shichvas zera by ish. He's just going in the cases where it says shichvas zera. What are we learning out from? The soita, why does it say shichvas zera by soita? Lamali the Tanya, like when in the Brisa, shichvas zera prat l'davar acher. Shichvas zera is excluding davar acher. And the other case, what's that? My davar acher. Rav Sheshes prat l'shekina l'shelo kedarka. The case of sota is husband tells her, don't do this, don't seclude yourself with this guy, and she does. And there's Adam that she secluded herself, and Merchoshe, she becomes usher to the husband until she drinks. She's usher misafik to the husband until she drinks the mayim hamarim, and it's established that she indeed was not mizana. So the case is certain things. It depends on what was the kinoi. If he intended only his concern was not for bia, his concern of establishing this isser, of doing that kinoi, of warning her, do not seclude yourself, was only for a concern that was not related to actual relations, then specifically for a concern that was not related to actual relations, then it wouldn't apply. Sota, the whole parsha of Sota would not apply. She wouldn't become usher to him as Safek. She wouldn't become usher to her husband. Amar of Sheshes, Prat l'shekina l'shalokadarka, the cases where he gave her kinoi, he asked her to be secluded herself with this guy for a concern of shalokadarka, for a concern of relations that's shalokadarka. Amalei Rava says Rava, Mishkeve Isha Ksiv. No, the pasuk says Mishkeve Isha. Then we establish from there that Bia shalokadarka answers a woman to her husband just like Bia kadarka. Ella Amar Rava, so Bia shalokadarka, that would be a full-fledged sota. So it can't be Shich Vasera to exclude that. Ella Amar Rava, rather says Rava, Prat l'shekino l'derech evarim. The cases where he gave her a kinoi, he established the issue of her to seclude herself with another man for a concern of derech evarim. With the, I don't know, where do you call it, the concern of like foreplay, not actual relations. So it says, that's what his concern was, and that she's not going to become usher to him for. Amalei Bai Pritzus Asar Achmana says Bai, of course not. That's Pashit. The Torah doesn't answer her to her husband because of Pritzus. She doesn't become usher to her husband on that. Obviously, it's usher. Ela Amar Abai Prat l'shekino la b'neshika. Rather, the case is, says Abaye, where he gave her kinoi for a concern specifically of the shika. He did not think that she would actually have relations, but he was concerned for contact for the first stage of relations, which would be contact of reproductive parts, etc. We say that makes sense by the opinion that holds ha'ara is ha'chnasa satara, is only the placing in the atara into the woman. But by the opinion that it's only neshika, some say ha'ara itself is neshika. What is ha'ara? So now some hold it's ha'chnasa satara, some say it's neshika alone. It's just simply contact. That would be already considered to be the isra of that would be a ha'ara, and we already established that an ashes ish becomes usher through ha'ara alone. So you can't say shechva zera is coming to i.e. a union that's able to come to fertilization that that wouldn't be that is obviously not excluding ha'ara, because we know ashes ish is usher b'ha'ara alone, and therefore if the shika is ha'ara, well then the shika would be usher. She would be in ashes ish through the shika. Shechva zera could not be coming to exclude the case of the shika. But the case is shechva zera is going to tell me actual relations. She becomes a sota, not where he simply is concerned for a act of foreplay. And you need it because you might think that the establishing the isra of the woman to the man depends on his kapeda. If he's makbid on that, then she should be usher to him for that. But kamash malan, no. The Torah says it's only actual relations, not foreplay that would answer the woman to her husband, even if he's makbid on it, and he tells her don't seclude yourself for this reason, and we have Adam that she did seclude herself, and that's the concern that he's all concerned about. He specifically may have to say that. Rashi's masubik if he has to say it or not. That taka, the Torah says she is not parsha sota. She wouldn't be usher to her husband masufik from that situation. Okay, and that's what Sheikh Vazer is coming to say. You need real relations, not the rechibarim. Amar Shmuel says Shmuel ha'ara is in the shika. Ha'ara is in the shika. We're going to get into this. Is ha'ara ha'chnas satara in the shika. Ha'ara is simply contact between the man and the woman. Ha'ara is in the shika. Mashal ha'adam sheminiach etzboa pivi yevshesh li'itchik habasar. It's a mashal to a person compared to a person who puts his finger on his lips. It's impossible that he's not going to push the lips a little bit. So too, if there's contact between the man and the woman, there's going to be some aspect of intercourse that occurs through that contact. Ki asar Rabba Bar Chanam Rabbi Yochanan Gemar Bias Shivcha Charufa. Gemar Bia b'shiv charufa zuachnas satara. Says Rabbi Bar Chanam Rabbi Yochanan, Gemar Bia b'shiv charufa. When it talks about shiv charufa, we said you need a full relations. That's achnas satara. That's simply just placing in the atara into the woman, and that would imply that what is ha'ara? We know shiv charufa doesn't need ha'ara. Shiv charufa needs shechva zera as opposed to ha'ara. So that would imply that neshika alone would be ha'ara, and the Gemar Bia, this shechva zera, that would be a tar. It would be achnas satara. So you see that from Rabbi Bar Chanam, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that he would hold like Shmuel that neshika zu ha'ara. Mesiv Rav Sheshes brought in his saver. Rav Sheshes brings a kasha. Shechva zera and chayav alal bia samirik. My love mirik gidla mirik atara. Shechva zera is only going to be chayav. But when it says shechva zera, it means he's only chayav on a bias mirik. A bias mirik is a relations that results in exchange of fluids. My love mirik gid lo mirik atara. Doesn't it mean when the more than the atara is placed in, the whole aver is placed in? Lo mirik atara, it just means where the atara is placed in, there would still be an exchange of fluids. Ki asa Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan says when Rav Dimi came and he and it wouldn't be a full exchange of fluids. But there would be some exchange of fluids with simply placing in the atara. Ki asa Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan ha'ara zuach nas satara. When Rav Dimi came, he said in Rabbi Yochanan that ha'ara is achnas satara. Amar lei Rabbi Bar Chana lo amar hachi. They said to him, but Rabbi Bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that shechva zera by shiv charufa means hachnas satara. That would imply that ha'ara is neshika. And he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, how can you Rav Dimi then come and say that ha'ara is hachnas satara in the name of Rabbi Yochanan? So Amar lahu, he said back to them, oh, you shakri, you shakri. He's lying or I'm lying. One of us is wrong. Kiyasa Ravan Amar Rabbi Yochanan ha'ara is hachnas satara. When Ravin came and he said, Ravin also came and he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, came here to Yisrael and said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that ha'arzach nesatara, ha'arzach nesatara. So we see out of Rabbi Bar Chana vadei pligi. He for sure argues by Rabbi Bar Chana. Rabbi Bar Chana had said that by that Gemar Bia is achnas satara, but it's a shechva zera that would imply that ha'ara is neshika. And he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, they're absolutely saying no, ha'ara is achnas satara. But at Shmuel mileim apolig, where we say he's arguing on Shmuel, Shmuel had said that neshika zu ha'ara. Neshika is ha'ara. And the question here is, that do we say ha'ara, as we call it, is from the stage of neshika until achnas satara? More than that is gemar bia. That's their statement. Or are they coming to say ha'ara is only achnas satara? Less than that, i.e. neshika wouldn't even be ha'ara. That's the question here. We say lo They don't necessarily argue because I can tell you that min shika v'yad achnasas satara ha'ara karila, that from the shika until achnasas satara is called ha'ara. That whole stage from the shika until achnasas satara is called ha'ara. Ki asar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda amar Rabbi Yochanan ha'ara is achnasas satara gemar bia mamish. Shmuel bar Yehuda came in Rabbi Yochanan. He said ha'ara is achnasas satara gemar bia means a full bia means. Bia mamish, a full bia, and mikama elech, and in the shika patralel poligad Shmuel. He says no, from less than ha'ara, less than achnas satara is the shika ba'alma. It's only just i.e. the shika is nothing, and you would be pater for that. It's not considered to be ar to be asr on it. Poligad Shmuel have an argument in the name of Shmuel. Shabbos. That's 45 minutes, 25 to 10. Yeah.
Tomorrow 8:15.